The call came just as I was arranging a vase of freshly cut lilies from the garden. The morning air was cool. Sunlight spilled through the wide windows of my lakeside lodge, glinting off the polished oak counter. I had spent the last hour in silence, trimming stems aligning colors, letting the rhythm of small rituals soothe the quiet hum of my retirement. Then my phone buzzed. "Mom, this weekend I'm hosting a retreat for 12 VIP guests." Ethan's voice filled the room. "Don't worry, they'll only stay a few days." The words sliced through the calm like a pin into silk. I froze, pruning shears in hand. For a moment, I wasn't sure I had heard him right. "Hosting guests, my lodge." "Ethan," I said slowly, "what retreat?" He chuckled, that confident tone he'd inherited from me back when confidence used to mean professionalism, not presumption. "Relax, Mom. It's good exposure. Tara and I posted about it. People are excited. It's fully booked already." My pulse quickened. "Posted where?" "On Instagram." Tara's followers went crazy. We already collected deposits. The vase slipped. Water spilled across the counter, lilies trembling in the current. Outside the lake glistened with quiet indifference. He had turned my sanctuary, the place I built to breathe again after 30 years of managing chaos, into a backdrop for influencers. Without even asking, I had spent most of my life orchestrating perfect weekends for other people. For 3 decades, I ran Monroe & Co. as a high-end event planning firm in Seattle. I built reputations out of color palettes and silence out of timelines that never missed a beat. I retired at 66 to finally live on my own schedule, away from the applause and anxiety of perfection. The lodge by the lake was my clean slate, but now even here my son was turning peace into performance. I wiped the counter with the edge of a towel, my hand trembling more from anger than from age. "Ethan," I said quietly, "you used my lodge as a rental." "It's not like that," he rushed to explain. "It's a wellness experience. We called it the Mindful Escape." "You always talk about mindfulness, right? It fits your brand." "My brand." That phrase did it. "I don't have a brand anymore," I said. "I retired from all of that." He sighed on the other end, impatient. "Mum, come on. It's just a few days. You'll hardly notice." I looked around the kitchen, the terracotta pots, the linen curtains I'd sewn myself, the old kettle whistling softly on the stove. Every inch of this place was mine. Every nail hammered by choice, not by necessity. And now it had been sold, marketed, hashtagged, without my consent. "Who gave you permission?" I asked. The silence on the line was brief, but deafening. "I didn't think you'd mind," he said finally. "It's not like you use the lodge for much. You said you wanted it to feel alive." Alive. The lilies drifted in the sink water, their petals collapsing under their own weight. I felt something collapse inside me too. I didn't argue. I couldn't not yet. Instead, I stared at the reflection in the window, an older woman in a simple linen dress, her grey hair tied back, her eyes calm but sharp. I had once managed weddings with budgets that could buy small islands. I knew better than to react without a plan. So I ended the call. After a long moment, I opened my laptop. My fingers moved with the precision of an old habit control, disguised as grace. I searched for Tara's Instagram. There it was, a glossy post featuring my lodge, framed by the golden hour light I'd once waited weeks to capture. The caption read, "Weekend Retreat at Lakeside Haven. Curated by Tara and Ethan. Disconnect, breathe, heal. Only $2,400 per guest. 12 guests, $2,400 each." My heart sank, not because of the money, but because of the audacity. My son, my own blood, had commercialized the last place that still felt like mine. Scrolling through the comments, I saw heart sparkles and a flood of can't wait messages. I saw words like rustic, authentic, and healing. None of them knew this place had been built for solitude, not for show. The lodge wasn't just a building. It was the punctuation mark at the end of a long, exhausting sentence. Now it was trending. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. The clock above the mantel ticked with soft precision. Outside, the ducks floated near the dock, their movements unbothered by human noise. I envied them. A text followed moments later. "Ethan, thanks. Again, Mom. We'll bring the group Friday morning. Don't stress, okay? Just trust me." Trust. Another word misused. I walked to the window, watching the ripples shimmer under the noon light. For years I had taught clients that control wasn't about power, it was about preparation. I knew that peace required boundaries. Ethan clearly had never learned that lesson. The phone buzzed again. A message from Tara this time, paired with a winking emoji. "Tara, your lodge is such a vibe. Hope you don't mind a little makeover before the retreat. We're adding a neon breathe deeply sign near the fireplace. It'll look amazing on camera." I set the phone down slowly, like handling something fragile that might explode. My fingers brushed against the cool ceramic of the flower vase. Enough was enough. I wasn't going to shout or plead. That wasn't my style. But I knew exactly how to restore silence when the noise got too loud. Outside, the wind rustled through the birch trees, scattering petals across the porch. I gathered the fallen ones one by one, placing them in the compost bin. My mind worked the same way, sorting chaos into order. By the time I poured myself a cup of tea, I already knew what needed to be done. 12 guests, 3 nights, no consent. If they wanted a mindful retreat, I would give them one they would never forget. A real one. The kind that begins in silence and ends in understanding. I took a deep breath and opened my old event planner's notebook. The pages still smelled faintly of roses and ink. I began sketching a new kind of plan line by line, in calm handwriting. Under the header, I wrote Operation Reconnect. And then with deliberate care, I noted the first step, remove Wi-Fi router. The lilies in the vase had wilted by the time I finished my tea, but I didn't mind. Some things had to wither before new lessons could bloom. That evening, as the sky turned copper and the lake mirrored its quiet fire, I whispered to the stillness around me, "If they came here for mindfulness, they'll learn what silence really means." The call had broken the quiet, but what came next would redefine it. I didn't shout. I didn't slam the phone or send a single message back. The silence itself became my answer. Years of managing people's chaos had taught me one truth: noise always collapses under the weight of calm. That night, I sat by the window of my lodge, watching the moonlight ripple across the lake. The air smelled faintly of cedar and wet soil. Somewhere in the dark, a loon called out its lonely song, echoing like memory. I sipped my tea slowly and let the quiet do its work. Anger is a fire. Silence is the mirror that shows where to aim it. The next morning, Clara stopped by. She was my oldest friend in town, a retired art teacher who lived a few houses down the shoreline. Clara had seen enough of life to know when something was wrong before I even opened my mouth. "You have that look again," she said, setting down a basket of lemons from her garden, the one you get right before you decide to rearrange fate. I smiled. "Ethan's bringing 12 strangers into my house this weekend." She raised an eyebrow. "For what a family reunion. A retreat. A paid retreat." He and Tara sold it online. Clara didn't speak for a few seconds. Then she laughed, not mockingly, but in disbelief. "They turned your sanctuary into a business venture." "Oh, Lydia." She shook her head, her silver earrings swaying like wind chimes. "What are you going to do?" "Nothing," I said. "At least not the kind of something they expect." Clara studied me, her eyes narrowing in the way teachers do when they know a lesson is forming. "You're planning something." "I'm preparing a lesson," I said. "For the weekend." She leaned back in her chair, intrigued. "Tell me more." "They want a mindfulness retreat." "I'll give them one. A real one." Clara grinned, folding her arms. "Then let them experience silence, discomfort, and reality. You always said wisdom comes in 3 forms: stillness, simplicity, and consequence." I nodded. Exactly. The plan grew like morning light, quietly, naturally, with purpose. I decided not to cancel Ethan's event. No confrontation, no warning. Just space for them to learn. By Thursday morning, I was already in motion. My notebook lay open on the counter pages, filled with neat columns of handwritten notes. The heading read, Lesson Weekend. The first item, remove Wi-Fi router. Done. The second, replace luxury bedding with straw mats. That took longer, but I worked with a sense of calm precision. Each soft duvet folded and stored, each pillow replaced with a simple rolled towel. The beds now looked clean, spare, humble. A retreat should teach gratitude, not indulgence. Outside, I set up a new wooden sign near the entrance gate. Mindful silence zone. No phones. No complaints. No exceptions. The words gleamed against the varnished wood like a gentle warning. Then I walked through each room, turning off the water heater, closing blinds halfway, and placing a single candle at the center of every table. It wasn't punishment, it was design. By noon, Clara came by again, carrying 2 thermoses of soup. I had a feeling you might forget lunch, she said, stepping over the threshold. So the lesson weekend begins. I nodded. Preparation day. She scanned the stripped-down living room and whistled. It's going to be a shock. Tara's followers expect spa-level comfort. They'll get something better, I said. Perspective. Clara smiled and handed me a small jar of lavender oil. For when your patience runs thin. It was thoughtful, but unnecessary. My patience wasn't thin. It was deliberate. As evening fell, I sat on the porch with a notebook in my lap, writing a small note for the guests. It read, Welcome to Lakeside Haven. This weekend you are invited to reconnect with nature, with time, with silence. Please surrender your devices upon arrival. Observe the rhythm of your breath, the sound of the lake, and the absence of control. The retreat begins when words end. I left 12 copies neatly stacked on the hallway console. Friday dawned grey and cool. Mist hovered over the water, curling between the trees like slow breath. I could hear the hum of distant tires long before the cars appeared. Ethan's SUV led the convoy. Behind it, a van full of smiling strangers' cameras ready. I stood by the porch, dressed in my usual linen trousers and faded blue shirt, holding a basket of folded towels. When Ethan saw me, his confident grin faltered just slightly. Hey, Mom. Didn't expect you to be here this early. I live here, I said evenly. Tara hopped out next hair, perfectly styled phone already recording. Oh my gosh, this lighting is perfect. She turned toward the lake. Everyone take a deep breath. We're here to recharge. Her voice grated against the quiet, like metal on glass. I handed Ethan a small wooden box. Collect their phones, please. He blinked. Their phones, yes. This is a mindful retreat. No distractions. You advertised it that way. He hesitated, then laughed awkwardly. Mum, that's more symbolic. You know, like spiritual branding. I didn't laugh. Then let's make it real. The guests exchanged curious looks. One by one, reluctantly they dropped their phones into the box. The sound of each device hitting the wood felt like a small victory. Once the last one was surrendered, I closed the lid and handed the box to Tara. You can keep these in your car. The signal's weak anyway. The next surprise came when they entered the lodge. The moment their eyes landed on the straw mats, the missing Wi-Fi sign, and the single candle lighting, a murmur rippled through the group. Where are the beds? One woman asked. In your rooms, I said. Simple bedding helps the body rest naturally. Tara looked horrified. Mom, they're paying guests. They paid for mindfulness, I replied. This is what it looks like. No one argued after that. The silence in the room was thick, hesitant, but real. I led them through a short orientation, how to use the kettle on the gas stove, where to refill the water from the outdoor pump, the schedule for sunrise meditation by the dock. Their expressions said everything. When the last instruction ended, I turned to Ethan. Running a venue isn't about comfort, it's about care. They'll understand by Sunday. He frowned, confusion flickering across his face, but said nothing. As the day wore on, the retreat took on its own rhythm. Without Wi-Fi or hot showers, conversation grew sparse. People wandered outside, sat by the lake, and stared into the still water. The air was filled with the sound of wind and the occasional creak of old wood. By nightfall, candles glowed in every window. For the first time, the lodge was truly silent. No music, no phones, no background chatter. Just breathing. From my porch, I could see Ethan pacing by the shore, Tara sitting cross-legged on the dock, her phone useless in her bag. Clara's words echoed in my mind, "Let them experience it." And they were, every minute of it. I wrapped a shawl around my shoulders and whispered to the darkness, "Sometimes wisdom doesn't need a voice, it just needs space." The lake shimmered under the silver moon, calm and infinite. The silence felt like truth. By Saturday morning, I knew exactly what had to be done. The retreat was scheduled to begin in less than 24 hours, and the best lessons are not spoken, they are lived. I packed a small suitcase, just enough for a few days at Clara's cottage in town, and tied my grey hair into a loose bun. Before leaving, I took one slow look around the lodge that had once been my sanctuary. If they were going to turn it into a stage, I would turn it into a classroom. The first act of preparation was quiet, deliberate. I unplugged the Wi-Fi router from the corner shelf, coiled the cable, and slipped it into my bag. On the table, I left a neatly folded note. To truly reconnect, one must first disconnect. The silence that followed felt cleaner, sharper, almost like the lodge exhaled with relief. Next came the sign. I painted the words myself on an old piece of cedar plank using black acrylic mindful silence zone, no phones. The brush strokes were steady, bold. Years of designing event signage had trained my hands well, but this one felt different. This wasn't marketing. This was a boundary. When the paint dried, I placed the sign near the front gate, where it would be the first thing anyone saw as they entered. Then I moved on to comfort, or rather the absence of it. Upstairs, I stripped every bed of its soft linen sheets and luxury duvets. The air smelled faintly of lavender detergent and nostalgia. I replaced each mattress with the rolled straw mats I'd bought from the local eco-store, the kind usually used for meditation retreats. They rustled slightly as I laid them down, a sound both humble and grounding. "Experience simplicity," I murmured to myself, repeating the phrase Tara had once used in one of her promotional videos, only this time it was literal. By noon, the lodge no longer looked like a vacation rental. It looked like a place meant for reflection. I left only what was necessary: wooden bowls, ceramic cups, a kettle and candles. Everything else went into storage: the plush towels, the espresso machine, the Bluetooth speaker. Each removal felt like reclaiming a piece of dignity. Outside, the sky was pale and open. The wind carried the scent of pine and rain from the north. On the lawn, I noticed a small flock of ducks that had taken to wandering near the pond over the past few weeks. They were a noisy, uninvited family, always quacking and splashing in the mornings. "All right, you're in charge now," I said aloud, tossing a handful of grain near the dock. They waddled closer, tilting their heads as if understanding the assignment. I decided not to chase them away. Let them stay. Let the guests learn that nature doesn't always fit into curated schedules. The next step was the water. I walked to the control panel and switched off the hot water system. A small red light blinked out, and the pipes went still. In my planner, I wrote Lesson 4. Appreciate warmth only when it's gone. By the time I reached the kitchen again, Clara had arrived. She wore her usual denim jacket and a look that hovered between admiration and disbelief. "You're really doing this," she said, glancing around at the stripped-down interior. "I am," I replied. "They wanted a retreat. I'm giving them the real thing." She laughed softly. "You're more patient than I'd ever be." "It's not patience," I said. "It's clarity." She followed me to the porch, where I was wrapping the router in a cloth bag. "So you're moving to my place tonight?" "Yes. I'll let them run their show. Sometimes silence teaches louder than any confrontation." Clara looked toward the lake, her voice thoughtful. "You know it's poetic. You spent your life organizing other people's moments. Now you're curating one final event, your own lesson." That made me smile. An event detox. We both stood there for a while, the lake shimmering under the soft afternoon light. The ducks quacked near the dock, as if applauding the idea. By evening, everything was in place. I walked through the lodge one last time, room by room, checking every detail, as I used to before a grand wedding. Old habits die gracefully. In the living room, I arranged the straw mats in a circle facing the fireplace. A single candle sat in the middle, its flame steady, unbothered by the faint breeze. On the mantel, I placed a wooden bowl filled with stones from the lakeshore. Each one was smooth-rounded, silent a reminder that time refines everything, even resistance. I left another note there, handwritten in calm, cursive stillness, reveals what noise hides. The kitchen smelled faintly of chamomile tea and lemonwood polish. I stacked the dishes neatly in open shelves, tied the curtains back, and let the night air drift through the window. The hum of crickets filled the distance. It was peaceful, the kind of peace that comes only before a necessary storm. At exactly 7:30, I heard Ethan's car engine in the driveway. I watched from the upstairs window as he unloaded boxes of food tote bags and neatly labeled wellness kits. His voice carried across the yard, cheerful, efficient, unaware. Tara followed behind him, her phone raised, as she narrated a preview for her audience. "We're setting up for our first mindfulness weekend. This place is going to be amazing." I smiled unseen behind the curtain. The irony was perfect. Once they were inside, I stepped quietly down the back steps, suitcase in hand. Clara was waiting by her car, headlights dimmed. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded. Let the lesson begin. As we drove down the winding road toward town, I looked back one last time. Through the trees, the lodge glowed faintly in the dusk, a small dot of light against the widening dark. I could almost feel it holding its breath, waiting for dawn, and for the truth it would deliver. That night at Clara's cottage, I sat by the fireplace with a cup of peppermint tea. The quiet there was softer, safer. My body relaxed, but my mind stayed alert. I imagined Ethan and Tara walking through the house, noticing the missing Wi-Fi, the straw mats, the cool tap water. Their surprise didn't worry me. It comforted me. Shock, after all, is often the first step toward awareness. Before going to bed, I opened my notebook one last time and wrote a final line under the day's entry. If they seek mindfulness, let them meet it face to face. I closed the cover, set it beside the lamp, and turned off the light. The room sank into darkness, calm and deliberate. Outside, a breeze brushed against the window, carrying the faint sound of ducks calling from the lake. It felt like the beginning of something necessary. By the time the first cars turned down the gravel road, I was already sitting by Clara's window, sipping tea and watching the rain clouds roll in across the lake. From here, I could just barely see the outline of my lodge. Through the morning haze, a calm wooden silhouette awaiting the storm of human noise about to descend. Ethan had texted me early. "We're on our way, Mom. Everything's going to be amazing." I didn't reply. Some lessons begin in silence. According to my plan, the retreat check-in was scheduled for 10:00 a.m. At precisely 9:57, the sound of engines filled the lakeside air. Tires crunched over gravel, doors slammed, laughter spilled into the stillness. "Wow, this is it," one of the guests exclaimed. "It looks rustic." From the upstairs window of Clara's cottage, I could imagine every expression, every misplaced expectation. I had seen that look hundreds of times during my career. Clients arriving with visions of perfection, unaware that comfort was always the enemy of awareness. Ethan's voice carried first, bright and confident. "Everyone welcome to Lakeside Haven. Over the next 3 days, you'll unplug, unwind, and reconnect." The irony made me smile. Inside the lodge, the guests fanned out with their weekend bags, designer yoga mats and portable ring lights. Tara was already filming, narrating in her signature influencer tone. "Okay guys, we just arrived, and it's even more beautiful in person. The air here is unreal. You can literally feel the peace." The peace didn't last long. 5 minutes in, one of the guests, A man in an expensive fleece jacket lifted his phone in confusion. There's no Wi-Fi. Tara laughed nervously. Oh, there's Wi-Fi, it just sometimes takes a second to connect. He frowned. It says no network available. Another voice chimed in from the kitchen. And there's no coffee maker, just this old kettle. Tara turned toward Ethan, irritation already creeping into her tone. Did your mom move it? I told you to check everything. She said she'd prepared the place. Ethan answered defensive, but unsure. Maybe she just prepared it for who Tara snapped. The front door opened again, letting in a rush of cold air and another round of complaints. Someone tripped on the straw mat laid out in the hallway. Someone else opened a bathroom door and gasped. The water's freezing. Within 15 minutes, the curated illusion began to crumble. Ethan tried to gather everyone in the living room for orientation, but the murmurs drowned him out. It's supposed to be minimalistic, he explained. You know, digital detox, nature immersion. Nature immersion, a woman repeated, pointing toward the window. There are ducks all over the lawn. They're blocking the path. As if on cue, one of the ducks let out a loud quack, echoed by 3 more. The sound bounced off the lake like laughter. This feels like a survival camp, not a retreat, someone muttered. I could almost hear the line from Clara's living room, and the image made me chuckle into my tea. Back at the lodge, Tara was losing control. She tried to regain her influencer calm, brushing her hair back and smiling into her phone camera. We're just, adjusting to the slower pace of life here. Right, everyone? No one responded. The recording light blinked red, capturing a silent group of guests huddled near the cold fireplace. Ethan, desperate, fiddled with the power switch. The generator should have kicked in by now. It didn't. The old grid system, which I had deliberately forgotten to reset, hummed once, then went dead. The lights flickered and faded. A collective sigh followed. Tara dropped her phone onto the table with a thud. Perfect. No Wi-Fi, no power, no hot water. What are we supposed to do? Meditate ourselves to death? Ethan ran a hand through his hair. Let me call Mum. He reached for his phone, but the screen displayed a single merciless message. No signal. Outside, the wind picked up. The ducks quacked louder, flapping their wings across the muddy lawn. Inside, tension thickened like fog. One of the guests tried to make light of it. Maybe this is part of the mindfulness challenge. Another laughed weakly. If it is, I'm failing already. The laughter faded when the first droplets of rain began to tap against the roof. Tara stared up, disbelief in her eyes. Didn't you check the weather? We can't do yoga outside if it rains. Ethan sighed. Tara, it's not the weather that's the problem. She glared at him. Then what is your mother's little experiment? The room went quiet. Even the ducks seemed to pause outside, as if waiting for the truth. She wouldn't do that, Ethan said quickly, though the uncertainty in his voice betrayed him. She's exactly that kind of woman, Tara cut in. She loves control. She probably planned this whole mess to make us look stupid. A cup fell from the counter, shattering on the wooden floor. For a moment, no one moved. Then Ethan whispered, Maybe she's teaching us something. The words hung in the air, fragile and strange. Tara turned away, muttering, Well, I'm not here for lessons. I'm here for content. Content, however, was impossible to capture. Every shot she tried looked dull under the flickering light. Every perfect moment slipped away into the unfiltered, inconvenient truth of reality. By afternoon, chaos had fully settled in. The guests huddled under blankets, their expensive retreat clothes replaced by borrowed sweaters from Ethan's car. The ducks, emboldened, waddled closer to the porch, quacking at intervals like critics reviewing the scene. Ethan attempted to make tea on the gas stove. The flames sputtered and went out. Someone laughed an exhausted, disbelieving laugh. This is absurd, the man in the fleece jacket said, standing up. I paid $2,400 for this. I could have gone camping and saved myself the trouble. Tara's patience finally snapped. She clapped her hands, forcing a brittle smile. Okay, everyone, take a deep breath. Remember, discomfort builds character. No one breathed. She turned to Ethan, her voice breaking through clenched teeth. Fix this. Call someone. Do something. But there was nothing to fix. Everything was working exactly as intended. By dusk, the rain had stopped leaving behind a wet sheen on the porch. Inside the once luxurious retreat resembled an abandoned set. Guests whispered about leaving early. Tara sat by the cold fireplace, hair-frizzed mascara, smudged her phone dead in her hand. Ethan stood beside the window, watching the ducks march proudly across the lawn. From Clara's porch across the lake, I could see the faint glow of candlelight through the fogged windows. I knew that glow well. It was the look of pride disguised as panic. The same light I'd seen in countless clients when perfection slipped out of their grasp. Clara joined me holding 2 cups of cocoa. It's begun, hasn't it? I nodded. Yes, the noise has arrived. The silence will follow. Out there, my son's guests were learning the first rule of stillness control. Nothing and everything reveals itself. The luxury retreat had collapsed under its own illusion. What remained was real mud-cold confusion and the sound of ducks reclaiming their territory. And somewhere in that chaos, the lesson had already begun. The rain came hard after dusk, a relentless curtain that blurred the lake and turned the path to the lodge into a stream of mud. From Clara's porch, I could see the faint glow of candlelight flickering through the fog across the water. The retreat that had promised serenity now looked like a sinking ship, dim shivering and lost in its own illusion. I stayed silent. Silence, I'd learned, is often more instructive than sympathy. Inside that lodge, I imagined every sound. The shuffle of restless feet, the rising whispers of frustration, the dull clatter of another failed attempt at lighting the stove. When the storm intensified, the power finally gave out completely, and with it, the last thread of patience. By 8 o'clock, the VIP guests had abandoned the idea of mindfulness. Someone tried to call a car service, only to realize there was still no signal. Another guest wrapped herself in a blanket and muttered, "I just want to go home." The ducks outside quacked loudly, flapping their wings in the downpour. Nature, it seemed, was mocking them with perfect timing. I pictured Tara pacing near the cold fireplace mascara, running hair frizzed from humidity. Her curated voice, once polished and confident, now brittle and sharp. Ethan would be trying to hold the group together, apologizing, explaining, scrambling, learning without realizing it. The one lesson every event planner eventually faces: control is temporary, but responsibility is permanent. By 9, most of the guests had given up. 2 cars finally managed to leave headlights cutting through the rain. Their tires sprayed mud across the sign that still read, "Mindful Silence Zone." No phones. How fitting, I thought. No one could read it anymore. At 9:43 p.m., my phone buzzed on the table beside me. The name on the screen glowed softly. Ethan. For a moment I hesitated. Then I answered. "Mum," he said, his voice hoarse, almost drowned by the sound of rain. Everything fell apart. The power's gone. The food's ruined. Half the guests left. Tara's furious. I don't know what happened this lodge. It's not what I thought it was. I let a moment of silence pass between us. The sound of thunder rolled faintly in the distance. "You're right," I said finally. "It's not what you thought. Organizing an event isn't like taking pictures for promotion. It's not about looking right. It's about working right." He didn't respond right away. I could almost hear him breathing, his confidence washing away with the storm. "I thought it would be simple," he admitted. "I thought people just showed up and relaxed. That's what everyone thinks," I said. "Until they're the ones holding the schedule, the meals, the weather, the mood, and everyone's expectations in their hands." Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the lake for a brief, brilliant second. I saw the lodge clearly, its roof glistening under the rain, its walls trembling in the wind. I remembered all those years of late nights, phone calls, broken contracts, last-minute disasters that no one saw. I remembered Ethan as a boy, standing backstage at one of my events, watching the perfect scene unfold, while I hid the chaos behind a curtain. You never saw what came before the applause. I said quietly. You only saw the sparkle, not the labor. He sighed a long, uneven sound. I didn't understand. No, I said, but now you're beginning to. A pause. Only the rain answered for him. Did you know it would turn out this way? He asked, finally his voice smaller than I'd heard in years. I looked out the window. The reflection of the lodge shimmered faintly on the water, distorted and beautiful in its imperfection. I didn't make it happen, I said. I just stopped protecting you from the truth. Another stretch of silence, then a quiet, almost childlike question. What should I do now? Clean up, I said. Feed whoever stayed. Make them tea if the stove still works. Thank them for coming, even if they're angry. End things properly. You owe them that. He exhaled shakily. Okay. Ethan, I added softer now. Don't mistake this for failure. It's just the first time you've seen your reflection without filters. He didn't answer, but the silence on the line felt different, less panicked, more grounded. Then the call ended, swallowed by static. I sat there a long while listening to the rain soften into a steady rhythm. Clara appeared in the doorway with 2 mugs of cocoa. How's he holding up? He's learning, I said. The hard way. Clara smiled faintly. The only way that lasts. Across the lake, the last candles inside the lodge flickered weakly. Then, one by one, they went out. The reflection on the water dissolved into the night. I felt a strange ache, half pride, half sorrow. Watching your child's illusions collapse isn't easy, but illusions must fall before truth can stand. When the storm finally eased, I stepped outside. The air smelled of wet earth and pine. In the distance, a single quack broke the silence, followed by another like a call and its echo. The ducks were still there, undisturbed, perfectly at home, in the chaos humans couldn't endure for a single night. It made me think of how many times I'd confused control for peace, how often I'd believed that order created harmony, when in fact it often just hid the mess beneath. Maybe Ethan needed to see that too, to understand that chaos wasn't failure. It was reality asking to be seen. I went back inside and wrote a short note in my journal. Consequence is the mirror that never lies. We look away, not because it's cruel, but because it's honest. The next morning, I woke to stillness. The rain had stopped. The lake shimmered under a thin veil of light. A single text waited on my phone. Ethan guests gone. Spent the night cleaning. I get it now. Thank you. I read it twice before setting the phone down. There was no anger in his words, no blame, just clarity. Outside, the ducks had returned to the lawn, pecking at the grass with quiet purpose. The sign by the gate leaned slightly, the paint streaked by rain, but the words were still legible. Mindful silence zone. No phones. I smiled. The silence had done its work. The illusion had broken, and what remained, mud exhaustion, humility, was the beginning of something real. That night, I didn't feel like a teacher. I felt like a mother watching her son finally meet himself for the first time. The mirror of consequences had done what words never could. By the time the clouds thinned the next morning, the world around the lake looked washed clean. The rain had scoured away the mud, the noise, the vanity. What remained was the raw shape of things, honest, unembellished, and quiet. Clara picked me up at 7. Her old Subaru smelled faintly of pine and coffee. She drove without asking questions, only glancing at me once the way old friends do when they already know the answer. Ready? She asked, softly. As I'll ever be. Officer Mike was already waiting by the turnoff to the lodge, a sturdy man with a calm face and a thermos in hand. I had known him for years. He often helped with local community permits. Today he wasn't here for confrontation. He was here for verification. The 3 of us drove down the gravel path together. The ducks greeted us first, waddling across the wet grass, as if leading a parade. Their feathers glistened in the morning light, each movement unhurried and certain. It felt almost ceremonial, as if nature itself had shown up to witness the conclusion. When we pulled up, Ethan was already outside, sleeves rolled up, sweeping the porch. His face looked older than it had the day before, less confident, more human. Tara sat on the steps with a blanket over her shoulders, phone still dead eyes fixed on the ground. He straightened when he saw me. "Mum." "Good morning," I said. "How's your retreat?" He tried to smile, but his voice cracked. "We cleaned up. I'm sorry about the mess." "It's all part of the process," I replied. Then I turned toward Officer Mike. "Shall we?" Mike nodded, stepping forward with his clipboard. "Mr. Monroe, Mrs. Monroe, I just need to confirm some property details and permit conditions regarding last night's activities." Tara blinked. "Permit conditions? What's going on?" I opened my folder, plain brown edges, worn from handling, and laid it on the wooden railing. Inside were neatly arranged documents, county registration papers, the notarized deed transfer, and the charter I had filed 2 years ago. "This lodge," I began, "is registered as a community non-profit retreat center. It was designated for educational and therapeutic purposes only. No commercial activities, no paid rentals, no influencer partnerships." Tara's mouth fell open. "Wait, what you're saying we couldn't?" Ethan turned toward me, eyes wide. "Mom, I didn't know. I know I said. That's the problem." Officer Mike stepped closer, glancing at the top page. He tapped a line with his pen. "Section 2B confirms that, ma'am. Commercial use would be in violation of local zoning and state nonprofit codes." He looked at Ethan. "Did you charge anyone for this weekend?" Ethan's face paled. We accepted deposits." Mike nodded slowly, jotting something down. "Then you'll need to issue refunds immediately. Otherwise, this could fall under unauthorized use." Tara's composure cracked. "Unauthorized? You mean illegal?" Her voice rose, but mine did not. "Calm down, Tara. It's not criminal, it's corrective." I turned another page and slid a highlighted document across the railing. The non-profit charter was established after I retired. It's meant to serve as a community retreat center, free to local educators, artists, or environmental groups. That's why it's tax-exempt. You turned it into a business without consent. She stared at the paper as if it were a foreign language. Ethan rubbed his forehead. "So even though it's the family lodge, it's not actually mine to use." "It never was," I said gently. "Ownership isn't the same as entitlement. You can inherit bricks and wood, but not purpose." The air hung heavy with that sentence. Even the ducks seemed to pause their chatter, fading into the stillness. Tara tried to laugh it off, though her voice trembled. "This is insane. You're pulling out legal tricks now." "No tricks," I said, sliding the last document forward. "Just the truth in writing." It was the title certificate embossed with the county seal, listing me as both founder and trustee. Ethan's name wasn't on it. Neither was Tara's. Officer Mike handed her the folder to inspect. "Everything checks out. This property is under non-profit protection. Any revenue-generating activity here could risk its status." Tara's breath fogged in the cold air as she clutched the blanket tighter. I set the papers flat on the table, letting her reflection blur against the seal. "I'm not winning, Tara. I'm protecting." "There's a difference." Her eyes glistened with anger and disbelief, but she said nothing more. Ethan stood motionless, broom balanced in his grip. The truth reached him, the way morning light creeps through blinds, slow but undeniable. "All this time," he said quietly, "I thought you were being controlling. Turns out you were just careful." I nodded. Careful is what mothers are, especially when their children mistake kindness for permission. He lowered the broom until it touched the porch rail eyes, fixed on the wet wood beneath us. "I messed up." I met his gaze. "Mistakes mean something only when you clean after them." Officer Mike finished his notes, closed the clipboard, and gave me a small nod. "Everything's in order, Mrs. Monroe. I'll file the verification with the county. You're clear." "Thank you, Mike." He tipped his cap and headed back to his truck. The ducks followed him halfway down the drive, as if escorting a witness from a trial that had already reached its verdict. When the engine's growl dissolved into distance, the only sound left was the slow drip from the roof. Even the ducks had stopped moving, as if the lake itself exhaled. Tara stood abruptly. "I'm going back to town." She grabbed her bag and brushed past Ethan, her shoes squelching in the damp earth. "You two can have your little mindfulness project." "I'm done." No one stopped her. Ethan turned to me, his voice low. "What happens now?" His shoulders lowered. The fight left his voice. When he smiled, it didn't pull tight at the edges anymore. Respect had found its own language. Rain tapped the gutter in slow rhythm. I reached into my pocket, the paper cool against my fingers, and handed him the charter, the sound of truth folding open between us. "Keep this," I said. "Not as ownership, as understanding." He unfolded it carefully, eyes tracing the inked lines. "You did all this quietly, didn't you?" "Yes," I said. "Because the loudest kind of strength is the one that doesn't need to shout." He nodded, and for a moment we both watched the ducks by the dock, calm, steady, completely unbothered by the storm that had passed. The scene balanced itself. Chaos had burned away. What remained was order, ink, and air that finally smelled clean. When Clara joined us with 2 steaming mugs of coffee, she smiled knowingly. "I told you, Lydia, silence wins in the end." I took a sip, feeling the warmth return to my hands. "No," I said softly, eyes on the lodge. "Wisdom does." And for the first time, the house didn't look like a battlefield. It looked like home again. The house was quiet again, almost too quiet. The kind of silence that feels alive, pressing against the walls, waiting for something to be said. Outside, the lake reflected the soft morning light, and the ducks moved slowly across it, leaving calm ripples behind. Inside, I could still smell the faint trace of yesterday's rain, mixed with pine and damp earth. Ethan stood by the kitchen counter, his hands gripping the edge of the wood, as if it could hold him together. The same counter where years ago his small hands had once rolled cookie dough, while I guided him patiently. The same space where laughter had once been our shared language. Now there was only tension. He didn't look at me when he spoke. "So that's it. You had to humiliate me in front of everyone." His voice cracked slightly, but his jaw was set. I stood near the stove, watching the kettle begin to tremble with heat. The whistle hadn't started yet, but I could feel it coming, the pressure building, the sound waiting to break free. "I didn't humiliate you, Ethan," I said evenly. "I corrected a mistake before it grew into something worse." He turned sharply, eyes flashing. "You could have just told me. You didn't need to bring a police officer. You didn't need to." I met his gaze. "To what? Show you the paperwork. Remind you that actions have boundaries." The kettle started to hiss softly. "You made me look like a fool," he said. "In front of Tara, in front of my friends. You wanted to prove you're still in control." The words hung heavy in the air. I could almost see them floating between us, sharp-edged and trembling. I reached for the kettle, poured the boiling water into 2 cups, and placed one in front of him. "Sit." He didn't move at first, but then he did. Slowly. The scrape of the chair against the floor sounded louder than it should have. When he finally sat down, I spoke quietly. "Do you remember this kitchen?" He frowned, confused by the question. "Of course I do. Do you remember standing on a stool right there?" I said, pointing to the corner by the counter, "trying to whisk batter faster than your arms could move." His expression softened for a second, despite himself. "You used to tell me not to rush." "Yes." I nodded. "Because rushing ruins the texture, and because patience is what turns ingredients into something worth serving." He stared into his cup. Steam curled upward, blurring the space between us. "Ethan," I said, "gently, what you did wasn't about the lodge. It was about forgetting that principle. You rushed to impress people who never cared about the recipe." He looked up, his eyes glassy but defiant. "You think I don't care about work. I was trying to do something on my own." "I know," I said, "but doing something on your own doesn't mean ignoring the hands that built the foundation for you. Independence doesn't erase responsibility. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. The whistle of the kettle rose again in the background, high and steady, until I turned and lifted it off the heat. The sound faded, leaving only the rhythmic tick of the cooling metal. "You think I wanted to embarrass you," I said softly. "But all I wanted was to remind you of something I once taught you right here in this kitchen." He clenched his fists. "What lesson is that? That work, real work, is not a performance. It's a promise." The words came out quieter than I expected, but they seemed to fill the whole room. He blinked hard, swallowing. "You could have just said that." "I did," I said, "over and over for years. But you stopped listening when you started chasing applause." He stood up suddenly, his chair scraping again. "You don't understand what it's like to want to prove yourself." "Oh, Ethan." I turned toward him, my voice barely above a whisper. "I understand perfectly. I spent my whole career proving myself. But I learned that you can't build happiness on the humiliation of others, or the disregard of those who helped you rise." The words landed differently this time. Not sharp, not scolding, just true. He opened his mouth again, but instead of anger, a sound broke out, something closer to a sob. He pressed the heel of his hand against his eyes, his shoulders trembling. For a moment, he was a boy again, not a man fighting for control. "I didn't mean to ruin everything," he whispered. "I just wanted to make you proud." "I know." I stepped closer, careful not to rush him. But pride built on shortcuts always collapses. "What you need now isn't my pride, Ethan. It's your integrity." He lowered his hands, tears streaking down his face. The anger was gone. In its place was exhaustion, the kind that comes when truth finally catches up. "I thought I understood you," he said. "But I didn't." "You will," I said. "That's what growing up is, a long conversation with the truth." He nodded slowly, his eyes red but clear. Outside, the wind rustled the pine branches, scattering droplets that shimmered in the light. The sound was soft, but grounding, a reminder that life goes on after storms. We stood there for a while, just breathing. The kitchen smelled like tea and rain. The wooden counter between us no longer felt like a divide, but a bridge being rebuilt. Finally, he spoke again. "What happens to the lodge now?" "It stays what it was meant to be," I said. "A place for people to find peace, not to sell it. If you want to help, there's room for you, but only if you remember what it stands for." He nodded again. "I will." The moment lingered, fragile, almost sacred. He wiped his face, then picked up his cup. His hands were shaking slightly. I smiled faintly. "You used to hold the whisk the same way." He gave a soft laugh through his tears. "Still can't get it right." "That's because you're still learning," I said. "And that's all right." He looked at me, then truly looked, as if seeing me for the first time, not as an obstacle, but as someone who had been holding space for his mistakes. "Thank you," he said simply. I reached across the counter and placed my hand over his. "No need. Just remember, humility is the only ingredient that never spoils." He nodded, the lesson sinking in deeper than any lecture ever could. As we stood there, the morning light filtered through the kitchen window, falling across the faded tile floor. The same floor where flour had once scattered, where laughter had once echoed. Now it held something quieter, but far stronger. A reconciliation born not from victory, but from understanding. The storm was over. The house was still. And for the first time in a long time, so were we. A week passed before I saw Ethan again. The storms had long cleared, leaving behind mornings that smelled of sun-warmed wood and wet soil. The lake was mirror still, its surface unbroken, except for the lazy movement of a duck gliding through the reflection of the sky. From my porch, I could see him walking up the path toward the lodge. No entourage, no camera, no music playing from a phone. Just Ethan in old jeans and a flannel shirt rolled to the elbows, a paintbrush tucked into his back pocket. The quiet fit him better than pride ever had. He didn't notice me at first. He set down his tool bag by the steps and looked around as if reacquainting himself with the place. The porch boards creaked under his weight. Then, without hesitation, he got to work. He started with the roof, hauling a ladder against the wall and climbing up carefully. I could hear the metallic clang of nails, the rhythmic scrape of his hammer against the tin panels. Each sound echoed through the valley like a small apology. By mid-morning, sunlight glowed on his skin, dusted with sweat and pine pollen. He worked methodically, stopping only to wipe his brow or squint up at the sky. There was no hurry this time. Every movement felt deliberate, respectful. When the roof was patched, he came down and began sanding the door. The once luxurious mahogany had weathered into dull grey, but under his steady strokes, its colour slowly returned. Paint chips gathered at his feet like brittle remnants of old mistakes. At one point, he paused, leaning the brush against the wall. His gaze drifted toward the lake. I could see his reflection in the glass door, tired, calmer, older. The kind of change that doesn't come from age, but from reckoning. I brewed 2 cups of tea and carried them down the path. He looked up as I approached. "You didn't have to come out here," he said. "I wanted to," I replied. "You're doing good work." He smiled faintly, then looked at his hands. "It's strange. The same chores I used to think were beneath me. They feel different now." "How so?" "They feel honest." The answer made me quiet for a moment. The wind brushed across the water, scattering a few fallen leaves. Somewhere behind us, the ducks quacked, soft, almost approving. He went back to scrubbing the wooden floor of the porch. The water from his bucket turned cloudy with dirt. Each stroke of the brush revealed cleaner wood beneath. It reminded me of forgiveness, slow, patient, and earned. By noon, Clara's car appeared at the end of the road. She stepped out carrying a box of pastries. "Did someone say free labor?" she teased. Ethan looked up from the steps, flushed and grinning. "Voluntary this time." She laughed and set the box down on the railing. "Well, Lydia, I'd say your lesson worked better than any sermon." Ethan shook his head. "Mum didn't teach me with words. She just stopped fixing things for me." I smiled, handing Clara a cup of tea. Sometimes silence teaches louder than speeches. Clara took a sip and nodded. And labor is the best kind of reflection. Ethan knelt again, scrubbing harder, the bristles squeaking against the planks. I could tell he wasn't cleaning just the porch. He was clearing himself of the last traces of arrogance that had lived in him too long. When he finished, he stood and stretched, looking around the property. "You know," he said, "I used to think work like this was meaningless. That success meant having people do it for you." "What do you think now?" I asked. He exhaled slow and steady. "That there's nothing shameful about effort. The shame was in thinking I was too good for it." The ducks waddled closer, curious. One pecked near his boot, and he laughed quietly. The sound was different, lighter, unguarded. He turned to me, eyes soft. "I don't deserve to run this place, but I'd like to help you keep it." "Then start with the dock," I said. "It needs repainting." He grinned. "Yes, ma'am." We spent the afternoon together working side by side. The sun warmed the boards beneath our feet, and the scent of fresh paint mixed with the clean air from the lake. Every brushstroke felt like a sentence in a story we were rewriting, one without resentment, without pride. Clara sat on a bench nearby, sketching the scene in her notebook. "You two look like a magazine ad for reconciliation," she said with a chuckle. "Don't publish it," I replied. "It's private." The 3 of us laughed. It wasn't the loud, nervous laughter of people avoiding truth, but the quiet kind that follows understanding. As the day slipped toward evening, Ethan carried out a sack of duck feed. He scattered it gently across the grass, watching as the flock gathered. "They're not afraid anymore," he said. "They were never afraid," I corrected. "They just didn't trust noise." He nodded. "Kind of like you." I met his gaze. "Kind of like you too." The light turned gold as it passed through the trees. Dust motes floated in the air, catching in the glow. Ethan leaned against the railing, eyes on the water. "I used to think respect was something you earned from others," he said. Now I think it's something you practice toward everything people work, even ducks. That's the right kind, I said. The quiet kind. We stood together as the lake turned to glass again. In its reflection, the lodge looked reborn, its clean doors catching the sunset, its patched roof shining faintly, like forgiveness made visible. Clara closed her sketchbook. Well, she said, smiling, I think the retreat center just found its peace again. Ethan wiped his hands with a rag. And its janitor, he added. We laughed, and this time the sound didn't echo. It blended with the air, soft and warm. When I walked back to the porch later, I saw him lingering by the dock, brushing the last strokes of paint along the railing. The wind lifted his hair, and for the briefest second, I saw the boy he once was the one who had stood on a stool beside me, trying too hard to stir the batter. I didn't call out. Some moments aren't meant to be interrupted. Instead, I stood there watching him work the lake, glowing behind him. Every motion carried meaning now. Every scrape of the brush was a prayer for balance, for redemption, for respect. The ducks settled near his feet, unbothered, as if they too had been waiting for this stillness. When he finally straightened and looked toward me, his expression said everything words could not. There was gratitude there, and peace, and something that looked very much like humility. The evening wind moved gently across the lake, carrying the scent of cedar and fresh paint. I felt it on my face, cool, honest, forgiving. The lesson was complete, but the echo of it would stay whispered in every ripple of the water, in every board he had mended, in every quiet heartbeat of this place. Labor had become humility, humility had become respect, and respect at last had become love. The following Saturday began with a kind of silence that felt earned. The air over the lake was cool silver with early light. The lodge stood still and ready its wooden walls, breathing in rhythm with the morning breeze. There were no banners, no cameras, no hashtags, just purpose. Ethan arrived before sunrise, carrying boxes in both arms. Inside were notebooks, folding chairs, and an old thermos of coffee. He didn't announce himself. He simply set everything down and began arranging the room. I watched from the porch, hands wrapped around my mug, feeling something I hadn't in a long time trust. When he finally noticed me, he smiled. They'll be here by 9. I figured we'd start with introductions and maybe a short walk around the lake. Who's coming? I asked. Local veterans, he said. The community center gave me a list. Some of them struggle with isolation, so I thought maybe a day here would help. His tone was quiet, measured. There was no performance in it, no lingering need to impress. I nodded. It's a good idea. He hesitated, then added, no cameras this time, no sponsors, just people. That last sentence carried more weight than he realized. I felt something unclench inside me. Then let's make it real, I said. By 8:30, the scent of apple pie filled the kitchen. The old oven hummed softly as I brushed melted butter across the golden crust. Ethan chopped apples beside me, careful and deliberate. The sound of his knife against the board was steady, almost meditative. This feels familiar, he said. It should, I replied. You used to steal the crust before it cooled. He laughed quietly, then caught himself. I did, didn't I? The laughter hung between us like sunlight through glass, fragile but bright. At 9 sharp, the first guests arrived. There were 6 of them in total, men and women in worn jackets, carrying stories heavier than their small overnight bags. One of them, a tall man named Howard, extended his hand to Ethan. Haven't been out here in years, he said. Didn't know it was open to the public. It isn't, Ethan replied. It's open to community. Howard smiled. That's even better. They gathered in the main room, taking their seats in a loose circle. The morning light filtered through the curtains, painting soft gold over the wooden floor. No one spoke at first. The silence was comfortable, not awkward, like everyone had agreed to start from stillness. Ethan began with a simple welcome. This place used to be about events, parties, things that looked good in photos. But today it's about something quieter. He looked at me for a moment, then back at them. It's about breathing again. The veterans nodded. One woman with cropped grey hair and eyes that carried fatigue and grace in equal measure said, "That's exactly what I need." From there, the day unfolded slowly. Ethan led a short walk around the lake, pointing out the ducks, the reeds, the small garden patches that Clara had helped plant. The group moved in silence occasionally, exchanging glances or half smiles. Every sound, the crunch of gravel, the ripple of water seemed magnified. When they returned, I had laid out pie and mugs of spiced tea on the long wooden table. No fancy setup, just home. As they ate, conversations began to bloom. Howard shared how he hadn't slept through the night in 10 years. Another man, younger, talked about losing direction after discharge. There were pauses between the stories, moments when no one said anything, yet everything was understood. Ethan listened more than he spoke. His hands stayed folded, his eyes attentive. Each time someone paused, he nodded gently, not to fix, not to respond, but simply to witness. I stood by the stove, pretending to busy myself with refilling cups, but in truth, I was watching him the way his face softened when someone cried, the way he didn't try to fill the space with reassurance. He had learned that silence, too, could heal. After lunch, Clara arrived carrying her guitar. She joined us by the porch and played a slow, warm tune that melted into the sound of wind and birds. Some of the guests hummed along. Others closed their eyes. When the song ended, Howard spoke again, voice thick. "You know, I thought I came here to talk, but I think what I really needed was to listen to this, to quiet to people who don't want anything from me." Ethan placed a hand on his shoulder. "That's what this place is for." I saw it then, the reflection of who my son had become. Not the eager host, not the frustrated dreamer, but the man who finally understood that connection wasn't a product, it was a presence. As the afternoon waned, the group began tidying up without being asked. Chairs folded, plates washed. Someone fed the ducks by the dock, laughing when one nipped at his shoe. The air carried that rare peace that arrives only after shared honesty. Ethan walked over to me, wiping his hands on a towel. "You were right, Mom. I used to think healing meant doing something big. Turns out it's just showing up and staying present." I smiled. "That's all any of us can do." He looked around at the group now gathered by the water, their laughter light and real. "It doesn't need to go online, does it?" "No," I said. "The best things never do." We stood together shoulder to shoulder, watching the lake shimmer under the setting sun. The golden light touched everything. The lodge, the trees, even the damp footprints leading back from the shore. Howard called out, "You'll host another one, right?" Ethan glanced at me. I nodded. "Yeah," he said. "Every season if we can. No fees. Just friends." A small cheer rose from the group. The sound blended with the rustle of wind through the reeds. When the last car drove away, the stillness returned. Not empty, but full. The kind of quiet that follows connection, not loneliness. Ethan and I stood in the kitchen, cleaning up side by side. I slid the last tray into the cupboard and wiped my hands on a towel. "You didn't need to apologize," I said. He looked surprised. "I was going to." "I know," I replied. "But you already did here with your hands." He smiled, eyes glistening. "Guess you were right about work being a promise." "It always is," I said. Outside, the ducks had gathered near the dock again, their silhouettes mirrored in the water. The air smelled of apples, pine, and something softer, maybe grace. As we turned off the lights, the lodge seemed to exhale. It had seen chaos, pride, consequence, and now healing. I paused at the door, hand on the frame. "You've rebuilt it, Ethan." He shook his head gently. "No, we did." And for once I didn't correct him. The night settled around us like a soft blanket. From across the lake came the faint sound of Clara's guitar, fading into the distance, a melody that felt like forgiveness itself. There were no speeches, no grand gestures, no need for words, only action, and that I realized was love in its purest form. The sun was descending slowly behind the line of pines, turning the lake into a pane of gold. The air carried the faint scent of apples and fresh paint, the two fragrances that now defined this place. I sat on the porch with my journal open on my lap pen, resting between my fingers, waiting for words to settle, the way the evening light did softly, without effort. Down by the dock, Ethan was playing with a small group of children from the town's sons and daughters of the veterans who had joined last week's retreat. Their laughter echoed across the water like chimes. He showed them how to skip stones, patient and gentle cheering when one managed more than a single bounce. The rhythm of the splashes merged with the quiet hum of crickets, beginning their night song. It was strange to see this same place, once the stage for chaos, now carrying so much calm. Nothing about it had changed physically. The lodge still leaned slightly to one side, and the wooden railing still bore the small scratches from decades of use. But the energy had changed. The place no longer strained to prove itself. It simply was. A few steps away, Tara sat on a picnic blanket, a notebook open across her knees. Her phone was face down beside her. She was scribbling quickly occasionally, pausing to look toward the water. Earlier that morning she had come to the lodge unannounced, holding a tin of cookies as an unspoken peace offering. Her first words had been hesitant. "I want to help this time. For real." And she had. All afternoon she'd been taking notes for what she called a real volunteering project, a program connecting young influencers with community work, not for views, but for understanding. Watching her now, hair blowing across her face, I felt no anger, no judgment, just gratitude that she was trying. Oscar, my old golden retriever, lay at my feet, tail flicking lazily each time a breeze passed. His fur glowed amber in the fading light. Every so often he lifted his head to watch Ethan's reflection ripple on the water, then sighed contentedly, returning to rest. I turned to a clean page in my journal and began to write. My handwriting had slowed with age, but tonight every letter felt deliberate. "Peace isn't silence," I wrote. "It's boundaries respected." I paused, letting the words breathe. They weren't just a reflection of this place. They were a map of the journey we had taken to arrive here. Peace had not come from avoiding conflict, nor from smoothing over mistakes. It had come from standing firm, speaking truth, and allowing others to meet it with grace. The porch boards creaked softly as Clara appeared behind me, carrying 2 mugs of tea. She handed one to me and sat without saying a word. We had always shared an understanding that didn't need explanation. Together we watched the water darken from gold to amber to blue-gray. "Looks like the lodge found its rhythm again," she said after a while. "It did," I replied. "And so did he." She smiled, eyes following Ethan. "He's different now." "He's listening," I said. "Really listening." The children by the lake began gathering their things, the smallest girl tugging on Ethan's sleeve. He bent down, tying her shoelaces, with the same care he once reserved for sealing contracts and arranging events. The simple gesture made something inside me tighten pride, but also humility. When he looked up and caught my gaze, he waved. I waved back. No words were needed. We had said everything that mattered in the quiet days that followed his reckoning. The rest was just living. As the families packed up, Tara joined Ethan near the dock. I saw her show him the notebook. He nodded, then laughed softly, tracing something she had drawn. A faint shimmer of relief crossed her face. They weren't perfect, no one ever was, but they were learning the language of effort. Clara nudged me gently. "You realize," she said, "that you've turned this place into exactly what it was meant to be." I closed my journal and smiled. "No," I said. "It turned us into what we were meant to be." She chuckled. "Always poetic. I learned from the lake," I said, looking out at the water. "Stillness doesn't mean nothing happens. It means everything finds its place." The sky deepened into hues of violet and rose. Across the water, the lodge lights flicked on one by one, warm and golden through the windows. Ethan and Tara were walking back up the path, now the children's laughter still echoing faintly behind them. When they reached the porch, Ethan handed me something small and smooth, a flat stone from the lake. Found this while we were skipping rocks, he said. Thought you might want to keep it. I turned it over in my hand. On its surface, he had written 3 words in faint pencil. Thank you, Mom. I smiled. It's beautiful. He sat on the step beside me, Tara beside him. For a moment, none of us spoke. The air felt full, yet weightless. The kind of quiet that comes after a long story has finally found its ending. Oscar shifted closer, resting his head on Ethan's boot. The gesture made him laugh. Guess he's forgiven me too. He forgave you long before you asked, I said. Tara looked out at the horizon. It's strange. I used to see this place as content. Now I see it as context. Ethan glanced at her, smiling softly. You're learning my mother's language. I raised an eyebrow. And what language is that? The language of patience, he said. We stayed like that until the last sliver of sun disappeared behind the trees. The water stilled completely, turning into a perfect mirror. In it, I saw us 3 figures, and a dog framed by the fading glow. 3 generations connected not by blood alone, but by effort, humility, and understanding. For a moment, it was as if time had folded in on itself, the past and present coexisting on the lake's surface. I saw the little boy with flour on his hands, the young man with ambition in his eyes, and the grown man now steady enough to kneel and serve pie to strangers. I reached down, running my fingers through Oscar's fur. He sighed again, content, his eyes half closed. The last of the light shimmered across the lake, soft and endless. I opened my journal one final time and wrote, "The water holds our reflections, but it also holds our change. The lesson of stillness is not silence, it's understanding." As night descended, the reflection of our small circle remained visible on the surface for a few seconds more. The old lodge stood behind us, warm and alive, breathing with the rhythm of the world it had once lost. No applause, no cameras, only the echo of laughter, the weight of peace, and the calm certainty that what was broken had been rebuilt. The lake mirrored it all, the past, the present, and the quiet promise of everything yet to come. And as the first stars appeared above the water, I realized that legacy was not something we left behind. It was something we lived moment by moment, in the stillness we learned to respect. And that's how still water found its peace again. If this story touched you, take a second to like the video. It really helps this channel grow and reach more hearts like yours. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from tonight. I love knowing how far these stories travel. If you'd like to hear more stories about family healing and quiet strength, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next one. Thank you for spending your time here, and remember, peace isn't silence, it's boundaries respected. See you in the next story.